There we go. Yeah, as being said before, we are recording the session. I would like to welcome you to this event at Agile Aarhus. I am one of the co-drivers of Agile Aarhus. I'm doing that together with Simon Kunde, which is here in the room. I'm also doing that together with Jonas Bungård, who's also here in the room, letting people in and chatting with people. Normally do that at least. Agile Aarhus is all about sharing and hearing others' experience. We kind of have two parallel tracks. We have this virtual track where we are welcoming everybody. So for those that don't know it, Agile Aarhus is a city in Denmark, the second largest city. So we're welcoming everybody to this virtual part here, but we are also having physical sessions or in-person sessions happening in Aarhus from time to time. So that's with the two parallel tracks. Yeah. On the meetup site, there are no future events at the current time, but we are planning for the second half of 2023, this year, could just say, and have some people lined up. We just need to get some of the formalities in place, and then we start publishing though and letting you know when that happens. That's what I want to say about Agile Aarhus. So let's talk about the topic of today. So we invited Pierluigi, and to be very transparent, I've actually known Pierluigi for approximately 3 years now. And the reason we actually know each other is based on this ScaleAgility, which grown out of the context of coaching meetup. And kind of been working on this for 3 years now. But Pierluigi will talk more about it, of course, so I'm not going to dip my toes too much in the topic. But I want to say welcome, Pierluigi, and let you take over.
Okay, thank you, Jan, and welcome everybody. And the idea is to give you a very brief introduction to ScaleAgility. As Jan mentioned, this is the result of basically 3 years that we are working on trying to create some what we call actionable principle for scaling agility. And it all started in the Scrum Alliance Guides meetup, and where we started discussing, we got a group of volunteers who started discussing, well, why should we stick to frameworks? Frameworks are model. They are interesting. They might be good and helpful in some cases, but they are still model. Is there something behind? Can we kind of go to the basic of what it means good scaling, and how can we distinguish a good and helpful way of scaling from what is marketing of some frameworks, what are some bad ideas that some frameworks have, and in general, can we have something that is framework free so that we can use it regardless of what type of scaling framework, of what type of scaling concept we want to use. And it started like kind of a pastime, some kind of a hobby, but then it grew more and more. And as Jan mentioned, it's basically 3 years that we are meeting, well, one per week, even though we got some holes here and there. And we created some more body of knowledge based on principles, based on ideas, based on tools. So it's quite difficult for me to tell you everything within the hour that we have available, but I'll try to give you at least an introduction of what we have discussed. And I would like this introduction also to be interactive. So of course I welcome your questions, your suggestions, your ideas, and so on. The material is still quite unpolished because we focus on the concept more than on how to present it, but I hope it should still give you some value. First of all, a few words about me. So if you're interested in my profile, I'm going to keep this for some like 10 more seconds and then I'll move away. and you can read it in the slides or in the recording afterwards. And here are the people who are behind this work called ScaleAgility. So you might recognize Jan there. Matt, Simon, and Colin are from the UK. And my name actually sounds pretty Italian because actually I am Italian originally, but in fact I'm living in Germany. And so these are the 5 people behind ScaleAgility. And let me start the discussion by asking you to define together scaling and an agile organization. These are 2 terms that we use fairly often, but how would you define scaling and how would you define agile organization? Let's see, a quick interaction. Let's see what you think.
I can help with agile organization if you would like.
But yes, please.
Scaling might be a little bit difficult for me to explain. But agile organization lately, actually, it's becoming so popular in the organizations, and they are changing their organization name, team names, and even position names according to that. It means actually becoming more customer focused and responding customer needs and requirements easily and quickly. And also that means organizations must be self managed, not by a project manager, but by someone who can facilitate or can be servant for the teams. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying let's try to apply the principles behind agility to the whole organization in a sense. And that would be actually an okay definition from my perspective. Let's see, other opinions or other definition of scaling.
When you go from a team level or a department level and scale it more enterprise-wise.
Yeah, this is what I hear quite often, but that's actually not a type of definition that I like. And that's actually one of the problems that we found out in this work, which is sometimes we talk about these terms, but we don't really have an actual definition. And if you talk about scaling, different people think about it in different terms. So actually, one of the things that we are doing with ScaleAgility, it's like taking quite a long time, is trying to harmonize the language. And that's why I actually ask you this, because I know that I get different definitions about it. Let's see, some other opinions.
You can say that scaling is something that you do when you have teams that need to collaborate about something, around something. Then you can there might be some dependencies, and then you need to if it's not enough just figuring it out yourself, you might need to look into some scaling frameworks or principles.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually for me, the very important difference. When we talk about agile organization, we are talking about how do we apply the principles, the values of agility, and also some methods of agility to the whole organization. So, do you want to have to use, for example, Kanban in your purchasing department? It might make sense or not. Let's talk about it. Do you want to have a company working based on the principle of an of agility? Yeah, sure, you can decide to do it or not. But when we talk about scaling, and I want to be very precise on this, we are talking about teams collaborating with each other. So it's basically, is your product big enough that one team is not enough, and you need to have more than one team working on it. And you can have a very large organization and still not need any sort of scaling. For example, years ago, I did some consulting in a very large organization, so a multinational with more than 30,000 people worldwide. But in the department where I was working, I was consulting for, They had a lot of very small products, each of them independent. Yes, there was some portfolio decision, but basically what I saw for several months were just individual teams, some small, some a little bit bigger, but just single teams working on products. A lot of them, but still products. So yes, the organization is big. Yes, you can apply the principles of agility, but that particular division didn't need any sort of scaling, because there weren't teams collaborating. So when we talk about scaling, we are talking about teams collaborating and working together. How can we help teams working together? And that's actually basically the operational definition that we are going to use when we talk about scaling. I want to be very precise so there are no misunderstandings behind it. And you probably know that when we talk about scaling, we are talking about different scaling frameworks. However, let's talk about what is the problem with frameworks. Now, let's see what type of scaling frameworks do you know? Let's name some.
SAFe, Nexus.
SAFe, okay. Nexus. What else?
Less.
Oh, less, yes. Give me a few more names.
Spotify.
Spotify, the question is whether this is actually a framework, and let's talk about it. But yeah.
Fast.
Sorry, when you're saying, just a second, when you're saying Spotify, what do you mean with Spotify? Do you mean the work done by Spotify? Or do you actually mean what is called sometimes the Spotify model?
Yeah, I mean the Spotify model.
Okay,
not the product.
Then when you talk about the Spotify model, I would actually agree that this is a framework, because it actually gives you a model how to organize your teams working together. While instead the work done by Spotify, this is what I would call something done ad hoc. Which basically means that Spotify, they started without any preconceived model. They started basically from, we are great people with great brains. Let's just turn our brains on and let's devise a way to work together. So from this perspective, I would not call it a framework. It's more of an emergent way of working based on a lot of work, I would assume, in creating that, which doesn't make it for me a framework. While the Spotify model, this is what McKinsey did when modeling Spotify, and that's actually, yes, indeed, it's a framework in a sense, even though kind of a very, 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 very weak framework from this perspective.
At least it's perceived that way in many organizations.
Yes, and it's being sold that way, actually. So from this perspective, you're right. But I would still distinguish what is the Spotify model as being sold by McKinsey and the work that Spotify does, which from my perspective is way more complex, way more emergent, and there is much more, how can I say, much more experimentation and conceptual sanity in compared to the Spotify model. So that's why I like to distinguish it between the two.
Scrum at scale?
Scrum at scale, yes. Let's write also this. Okay, then there are a lot of those. And to be honest, the reason why I wanted to collect all these here is because for me, this is, it's a jungle. In a sense that there are a lot of different models, and you might like one more than the other, but in a sense, they are still, all of these are models. And some models are better, some models are worse. And we can say that they are also, in a sense, a thinking process, thinking thinking tools in a sense. Some are more thinking tools, some are less thinking tools. So when you talk about the Spotify model, it seems less of a thinking tool and more of an organizational model, where instead if you go into large-scale Scrum, for example, it's much more of a thinking tool than what is an organizational model. But the basic idea is copy paste. So the marketing hype behind this is just take our model and use it and you'll be successful, which obviously it's not the right attitude from my perspective. A lot of these frameworks, they have some assumptions behind. And these assumptions are very often actually hidden. And being hidden, then the question is, are they valid for your organization or not? So it's not that frameworks are bad, just that we believe that we actually need something different. In a sense, all these frameworks are also some body of knowledge about how to scale agility, but they are actually very focused on the model that they propose. And we believe that there is a need of something that is, in some way, a more generic thinking tool and a framework-free thinking tool. Something that allows you to apply even safe or less or whatever you want, but to apply it with sanity. And therefore, when we started to put together these ideas, we found out that it actually it is helpful to think of scaling outside of a framework. And in fact, in ScaleAgility, there is no framework. There is one problem that I often see. So some of you are probably confident with this nice big picture of SAFe. Okay, some of you might be confident with this nice picture of less. Now, what I see when I talk to actual clients is that very often they just know this picture and they simply use this picture as they are. But you know, this picture of less, it's not less. Less is much more complex than that. This picture of SAFe is just a basic introduction point, but SAFe is much bigger than that as well. So in a sense, for me, when we have when we look at this big picture, I see a lot of clients taking these big pictures and using them as they are. But it would actually be the same as I played once this game and now I'm a neurosurgeon. Obviously, I'm not. So there is quite a lot of assumptions, ideas, body of knowledge behind all these various frameworks. And for me, it's good to look at what happens behind the scene, behind the curtains, and there is something that we can learn, some basic principles behind it. So that for me is actually the value of the work we are doing in ScaleAgility. So we are not trying to replace all this framework. We are trying to give you some basic thinking tools that helps you to use them properly. Be careful, not all these frameworks are the same. So the fact that we are considering the good and the bad things of these frameworks, it doesn't mean that they are all good. So if you want to implement SAFe, have fun. You'll suffer later probably, but that's my opinion, of course. You might disagree on that. Still, even if you want to use SAFe, the idea is, can we give you some suggestion on how to use it in a better way? So why are we done ScaleAgility? And basically, we have done it because we want to give some general principles. That are framework-free. So as I said, you can use it with SAFe, you can use it with less. You can recreate your own Spotify experience and still, so basically create your own scaling concept, and still this principle will be helpful. At the same time, as we said, we are trying to unify language. So, for example, in SAFe, there is a value stream. What is a value stream? How would you define a value stream in SAFe? Any taker?
We are not certified to answer that question, unfortunately.
Okay, so first you have to go for a 4-day course, but there must be somebody with some experience in SAFe.
There is an official trainer. Come on.
Yeah. Well, okay. I tell you, I mean, I haven't seen SAFe version 6, so I cannot comment on that. It's too recent. But basically, a release train and a value stream is basically a group of teams working together, but there is in fact no type of no thinking behind. I haven't seen any thinking about how to put together such a value stream, how to put together a release train. Yes, there is a release train. It's a group of people up to 150. They work together and therefore they have to plan together. But how do we do that? So how do we decide whether a team or a part of a product is part of a value stream, is part of a release train or not? These are things that are really not really very well defined, actually, and unfortunately, obviously. So in less, we have a concept of a product, okay, but what if we are not developing a product? If we are developing a service, for example? What is exactly a product? And what is a product if your organization is developing hundreds of products based on some common technologies? Okay, so there are some inconsistency in language that, from my perspective, they should in some way be addressed. So that's another point. The second thing is we want to reveal assumptions. So, or actually, let me put it in a better way. We want to make assumptions explicit. And we also want to work on the abstraction. So when we talk about scaling, we can actually work at different abstractions level. So the big picture that we are seeing here is actually something high level here. And then there are all the details that are documented in the various books and things like that. But what we believe is that there is something missing here in between, and these are guidelines, principles, you can call it. Now, to be honest, it's not true that all scaling frameworks are missing this. If you look at large-scale Scrum, for example, they have quite a lot of these ideas. There are the guides, there are the 600 experiments. There is probably quite a lot of them, and it's difficult to orient yourself among them, or at least you need a lot of experience. But some other frameworks are actually very thin in this intermediate part. There might be some implementation detail down here, but we are missing this kind of intermediate guidelines that actually help you to implement the things properly, and they help you to get beyond those big pictures drawings that are so popular, but they don't tell you actually much. And one interesting thing that we want to reveal is that when we talk about large organization, where we have a lot of teams working together, we typically have contending and balancing principles. For example, imagine that you have 20 teams working on one large product. Now, an interesting question that we get fairly often as consultants is, well, how many product owners do you need? What would be your answer? Let's say you have 20 teams working together on the same product. How many product owners would you have there?
I would say that you at least need one in the top, sort of a chief product owner, to have the overall view of the product, since you only have one product. But that being said, you probably also need someone to, product owners, business consultant, what you would call them in the team, to help. But you need, I think it could be good to have one setting the direction for the whole product.
So what you're saying is we need in some way to drive the direction of a product, and that direction should be given clearly by one person. Why? It's interesting. You're perfectly right, actually, but why is it important? Actually, this is the model that Scrum proposes, if you think about it. Okay, why Scrum tells you for a team we have one product owner? What is the value of having one product owner instead of, for example, a committee?
Center of decision.
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
Center of decision. There will
Center
be one
of decision. But more important, when you start having a committee or a group, then typically what happens is that a lot of decision might get political, might get based on balance of powers and so on. And so Scrum wants to cut the crap and says, okay, there is one decision maker and that person takes care of driving the strategy. So we can have fast reaction time, we can have fast decision, and actually uniform decision rather than being driven by the struggles of power that you typically have in organization. So yes, I perfectly agree. Even if you have a large organization, on one side, it would be good to have only one decision maker that gives the direction. However, what do you do with 20 teams? Probably you cannot have, actually probably, we know from experience that no, you cannot have one product owner working in 20 teams. That would be too much. So on one side, we want to have less product owners because in this way we have a much tighter the group taking decision on a product and driving the strategy in a uniform way. On the other side, we need to be able to drive the priority through all the teams that we have. So probably one product owner is not enough. So as you can see, we are going to two different directions that are contending, and we would prefer to have less product owners, but sometimes we have to accept to have more product owners and probably some sort of a product owner in chief or something like that. So these are things that I don't really see typically discussed in frameworks. Large-scale Scrum talks a little bit about these things, but this is actually, you could say, in fact, some sort of a engineering choice. Or as we tend to talk about in these days, it's kind of an organizational design choice, what we want to do. And of course, it depends on the people you have. It depends on what are the people that you have available, how much they know and learn about the product, and so on. So there's no clear-cut decision. We would like to have less product owners, but sometimes we have to accept more. So basically, let's recognize that this is actually a very complex field, and therefore we need to understand that we are going to have some trade-off to make. So normally, when we talk about Scrum, let's go back to a single team Scrum. What we're saying here is that we have some requirements. And then in Scrum, we have a team that delivers then the product. So at the end of it, we have a product. And in the model that we have with Scrum, then what we would ideally like to have is to have somebody called the product owner who is in charge of all of this and gives direction. Make sense? Are we all aligned on this? Okay, good. Fine. Now, if this is a model that works, how can we get it done in a large organization where the situation is probably like this? We have some different set of clients giving requirements, and then we try to do things to create a product. And by the way, as a product, for a product, we could, I mean also a service, something used internally by the company, whatever. But basically we have, that is one product, and this is actually another product that we develop. But then we take something from this and we deliver it to this group so that they can do something. And by the way, we can take something from here and we can put it to this team. By the way, here we have some people developing something that then is actually used as an input here and as an input here. Oh, and by the way, something done by this team is going to be used by these people to then create something else. Oh, well. So how many products, how many product owners do we need? How many teams do we need? This is reality of the reality of a lot of organizations, right? Oh, what do we do in here? So tell me, what would you do in here? Let's hear some ideas, some suggestion.
In traditional methods, I would say you need a program management here. But
well,
in
yeah.
Agile way,
Yes.
I don't know how to work.
Yeah, but see, that's a problem. Yeah, okay. So, by the way, this is the reality of a lot of organization. We want to have synergies between parts of the organization because we want to reuse and create as much value as we can based on the same on the same work that we do. So we don't want to waste or duplicate the effort in companies. So this is actually not an uncommon scenario, right?
Not at all.
And now here, if we talk about teams, product owners, and so on, then how do we do this? By the way, a very common initial question that I get when I work with a customer that has a situation like this is, Pierluigi, tell me how many product owners I need. Well, you know, you have kind of a mess there. So what do you want to do there? Now, I see in the chat, Freya, if I pronounce it correctly, says Scrum or Scrums or common planning. Yes, okay, but keep in mind that we might be talking about possibly thousands of people in some large organization. Okay, Jonas writes, visit team topologies, they look like component teams. Well, very likely they are. So when you look at the reality of an organization like this, you typically find something similar. So those different parts of a development are handled by different teams that are component teams. There are some people called product owners covering those areas that I marked in green. However, are they really product owners? Probably not, because they are taking care just of a part of the organization. And then you might even have an old functional organization per departments that in some way transversal to this. Okay, so now this is the reality of a scaled organization. These people have to collaborate together, else there is no output. So we are in the definition of scaling. Yet, I mean, of course, each of those teams could actually do some form of agility, implement Scrum, implement Kanban and whatever, and that will actually help locally. But does it help globally in getting products faster on the market, in getting products that are more closer and more tighter to what the customer needs? I don't know, but to be honest, I kind of doubt. Okay, so you can do easily a local agility, but when we talk about scaling, we're talking about making these people work in an agile way. Now, I see Heine, if I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, please correct me, in the chat writes, could start deciding which products are the most important and then organize around this setup. Yeah, that's interesting. But the question is, what are the products here? How do we define a product in here? Now, before we can discuss how many product owners, how many teams we need, how they are organized, one important thing that we need to discuss in here is what are the actual products? So what Heine writes in the chat, actually, it's one of the basic principles that we have in ScaleAgility, organize around product. However, very likely you might need to reorganize this organization so that they can really work more around products.
Yes, fully agree.
Okay, so what a lot of organizations are doing is, okay, let's implement Scrum in various teams, but let's keep this organization as it is. Okay, and obviously this is not helpful, or I would say it's locally helpful, but definitely not global. Now, the idea is it could take quite a long time to put some sanity in such a system. Okay, ideally, I would like to go to a model that is as closed as what we have above here. So I would like to go to a model like this. But the question is, how can I move from here to here? And by the way, you don't have to think about it as a one-step change. It could be something like a movement that it might take quite a long time to get there, per various iteration. Now, let me give you an interesting idea. Which is how we define products is how we evolve a scaled organization towards, and I'm joking a little bit, but not that much, towards sanity. The real problem is that most organizations are organized in such a complex way, such a complicated way, I would say, that putting some sanity into the development system is incredibly difficult. And it requires a lot of energy from management to actually change an organization to move in a healthier way. Now, and when we do this, now we can start talking about product owners. Now we can start talking about teams. So one thing that, to be honest, for me, it was a revelation in the work that we did. It's that instead of talking about product owners, instead of talking about how do we organize a team, we should actually first work on the product. So the first work is definition of product. How do we define products in such a complex scenario? And when we know what products are, then that is going to inform how do we get better product owners? How do we get better teams in the organization? So in a small organization, you can talk about product owners, team, and products. There's not a big problem. You can do that all at once. But in large organization, if you want to put sanity in such a complex thing, you need to discuss what are the products as we can see them now? How are we going to evolve the products over time? How are we going to make sure that they make sense? And how do we evolve the capability of the people, product owners and teams, to match this product? So in a sense, the definition of product is what drives the improvement in the organization, in large organizations. And now let me stop for a second because I realize that I'm getting quite philosophical. So in case you have questions, feel free to ask them.
I have a question.
Sure,
So
go ahead.
what do you do when you have a platform or more actually a set of platforms delivering different shared services towards different products? Should you define the platform as a product, or should you include the services? Or how would you do that in practice?
Well, let me go back to this mess. Okay. Now, if you define the platform as a product, that product is not really delivering something to a client. assuming that is not a product, assuming that is not sold separately. Okay, so if in that scenario, then so that's a very common scenario. Actually, you say, okay, fine, we have a platform. Okay, and then we have some other things that are built on top of this platform, and they are using the services of this platform. Okay, sometimes they are called verticals, vertical 1, vertical 2, vertical 3, and now here you happen to have your users interacting with these. But even though the users are interacting with that vertical, they are in fact interacting with the whole system. Now, what would I prefer to do in this case? I would suggest that this, as it is, should be a product. Ideally. And if this is a product, then suddenly I have feature teams that are capable of handling everything from the beginning to the end, and they can work customer-centric, they can deliver the functionality to the actual users. And obviously, this could be a product. And obviously, this could be a product. Sorry. Change color. This could be a product. Oh, please note, we have something here that is in common, but we know a solution, and this is called collective code ownership from extreme programming. Remember, we don't have just Scrum, we also have other Agile methods, and extreme programming is a very important one. Now, there are some challenges, of course, in here when we talk about how to test this thing. Obviously, it's not a trivial thing, and how to guarantee the quality in there. But let's face it, it's 2023. I assume that all of you in your companies, you have an automatic regression test system that does automatic validation very quickly of your product, don't you? Okay, no, I know that most of you don't have it, and I know it's a huge problem. But this is where the organization and the technical solution, in some way, they have to match. So it's not a trivial thing to do it in a large organization, but for me, it's actually crucial. And now suddenly, you can have one product owner for the product blue. Okay, and I have a product owners always in green because it reminds me of $1. So product owners responsible for the return on investment. Okay, one product owner for product green and one product owner for product red. And in this way, you have decoupled the development. It's not really true. There are some technical dependencies to take care of. But in terms of customer focus, each of the product owners can focus on their own customers. Okay.
So would you then say that there shouldn't be any teams within the platform, or should different teams just share the code, or should there be some teams just working on the platform?
Well, look at that blue line in identifying the work of a team. I have a team that works on the whole product, and these are feature teams. Now, you might have feature teams that are actually not competent on the whole part of the platform, but they take care of different parts. But I would prefer to have, and it's not just me, it's a common recognized thing, that I would like to have teams capable of working basically end to end. Okay, now the question is, it's easy if all that is 20,000 lines of code in a small product. It's obviously harder if this is a 20 million lines of code on a very complex, I don't know, telecom or banking systems and so on. So while this would be the ideal target solution, the question is, how do you reach the target solution? I've done it a few times with some clients, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of expanding knowledge of teams and things like that. Okay, so it's not an easy problem, but let's face it, when we talk about large organization, it's never an easy problem. Okay, and that actually tells you the basic requirement for leadership to stay on this particular topic and really work in a consistent way. Okay. Okay, Camilla?
Yes, just a comment working in Danske Bank. We see this quite much, the old legacy systems and so on. But I guess it's the journey about decoupling code in such a way that you can go towards this sort of, so the journey of trying to make less dependencies between those products, if you say like that.
Well, the problem when you decouple the code, you also decouple the knowledge.
Yeah, I know.
So I know one part of a system, you know another part of a system, then I've developed everything according to the interface we defined, you did as well, and then when we join forces and integrate a product, everything will work beautifully, doesn't it?
Yes, I know.
No, it won't.
So it's not easy. It's not easy. I'm 100% with you. But if there should be some wishes for that make it easy for product owner 1 and 2 and 3 to work, what would then be the way forward, you would say?
Well, okay, let's face it. Behind a system like this, you need to have an architecture behind it that makes sense. Okay, and when I talk about make sense, let's talk in terms of let's say good object orientation. So with a lot of cohesion in what you do, with modularity, with possibly low coupling and things like that. So a healthy architecture is going to help you doing these things. A modern architecture, which basically means have some more uniform technologies rather than, some modern super duper Java code on one side and some code written in COBOL on the other side, that will make it difficult for the people to understand the whole system, obviously. That is also going to be problematic. But in general, ideally, this is what I would like to have. Now, is it possible? How complex it is? What is the path to reach there? Is it possible at all to reach there? Those are actually interesting questions. Now, I see in the chat that the team topologies book has been mentioned a few times. And one of the idea of team topologies brings you exactly in the direction of isolating parts, which is let's reduce the cognitive load for the team. Okay, let's try to minimize it. Well, actually, our view in this case is you should try not to overload the team. So you need to keep the cognitive load under control. But if you want to go in a direction like this one, where you have competent teams working on the product, you will have to increase their cognitive load. It just needs to be manageable, so people have to learn over time. And let's face it, in large system, you will need to have some divisions eventually, but try to keep it as a minimum. I see a question in the chat. How do you see when a product involves mechanical and electronic parts, or as a software and digital platform? Well, that makes your problem even more complex because obviously there are different technologies involved. However, maybe the teams can learn. Let me give you a real life examples. I was working with a team developing some products that have mechanical, electronical, optical parts, software parts, and so on. On day one, when I met the team, there were something like 20-something people in the team, and probably nobody really ever checked how many there really were. Eventually, over time, they started learning, and the team resulted in 6 people being able to do 99% of the work by themselves. Obviously, it went through a pretty big learning phase. Obviously, the person with experience in mechanical engineering wasn't a software developer yet, but at least they understood each other. Now, is it possible in all cases, say, large-scale automobile development? Probably not. Actually, I'm fairly sure it's not. However, if instead of having, let's say, 2,000 people working on a product, you could reduce it to, let's say, 200 because the people have learned much more and they are able to operate on a larger part of the system, then you're going to do yourself a favor. Okay. Camilla writes, she was talking about architectural point of view. Yes, architectural decoupling is good. What is bad is when you're decoupling the knowledge of the teams. Okay, so let's distinguish between the two. So a good componentized architecture, yeah, absolutely. Componentized teams with local knowledge, that's bad.
I agree. I understand. Yeah.
Okay, and that's actually a trade-off that you need in some way to do that, to organize. So a lot of a lot of different things to consider, and we don't have that much time available, but I would like to show you briefly some of the principles. First of all, we haven't yet published something officially, so there are some conference presentations that we have done. But here are a few ideas. So first of all, we have different categories of principles. You can read them in the slides, but there are some generic principles, some principles dedicated to teams, to product ownership, to leadership, actually. And in fact, there are more that we are preparing. So the 5 in green are the ones where we have something stable, and we have some other ideas that we are going to work on. Let me show you some product principles very briefly, and feel free to contact me in case you want to know more, but it's basically, we want the products to be as much as possible end-to-end, so not components. If we have to split them, there are some natural interface very often that actually might help what Camilla was saying, or what was in the comment from Peter about mechanical, electronical parts. There are often some natural interfaces that you can use for that. For example, I was supporting a company that was developing some electronic products, some kind of electronic platforms with some software on top, some kind of an operating systems on top. And the natural interface there was not hardware on one side and software on the other side. The natural interface was, let's have a hardware with a basic software functionality to have a hardware running. So hardware with a support for the operating system. And that was one part of the organization. And the second part was the operating systems themselves, the pure software type of. And that was a natural interface that was very good for them. Cohesion at the architectural level is also a criteria. If you have to split the product into a smaller one, cohesive architecture is actually a very good thing to have. And we should evolve trying to go to more end-to-end product. But of course, that depends also on the knowledge of the teams and how you can do that. Avoid components. Yes, absolutely. Not in terms of architecture, but in terms of people organization. And when you talk about an organization that is as complex as this, it would be interesting to talk about, what about the synergies between products? So maybe this product here and this product are so close and they are going to the same market that maybe they should go to the same product owner, for example. I don't know, it's just an idea to consider, obviously. And then there are some constraints that are the various technology, the various things that limit your capability of extending a definition of product. So these are basically way of thinking, and when we publish more, there is obviously rationale and some more things behind it. Just that I want to check with the time. Jan, how much are we allowed to overrun? So do people leave at 10 or do
we should expect people to leave at 10. So,
we should expect people to leave at 10. So there isn't that much time to go on. But basically, you see, there are some basic ideas that are important to try to keep in an organic way. And let's say you want to use SAFe. Okay, fine. You want to use SAFe. I'm not happy for you, but if you want to use SAFe, you can use SAFe. And now the question is, how do you organize those teams? What is that value stream? How close is it to one of your actual product? What would be the definition of product that it's good to use today to organize in a customer-centric way? Okay, and how can we extend the knowledge of a team so that they are more capable of working as a real feature teams? By the way, in SAFe 3.0, I think, the teams down there were supposed to be feature teams. Now this has gone over time. There is no mentioning of feature teams, but for me, that's actually important. So even if you're using a framework that exists, there are some very good questions that you can ask yourself about these things. There is more to this, obviously. We have some workshop tools and things like that we have developed. What I will put in the slides is a pointer to our XP 2022 conference presentation, where you can actually, the slides are a little bit more verbose and there is more time to explain things in case you want to read more. But as I say, feel free to contact us in case you want more information. Okay. And as we have 3 minutes, I would like to stop here and see, is there questions, something that you would like to ask?
It's just a comment that I guess, I mean, in general, I think you also said it in the beginning, that the frameworks are frameworks and they sort of can almost never be implemented in a, fully perfect way. That
Yes.
you need to do these trade-offs all the time. So what we win by doing this, you lose by doing that instead. So it's I guess to take the most clever decision in regards to the situation you're in.
Absolutely. And one interesting point from my side is that a lot of these frameworks, they explain you the framework, but they don't give you the thinking tools to understand what are the trade-offs that you need to implement. Okay, and I don't know that whether they have no clue about what these trade-offs are, or they don't want to tell you, or they don't care telling you. I don't know what it is. Some are doing a better job than others. So notably, large-scale Scrum is very strong on the thinking tools. However, I see very few people who really understand the thinking tools behind large-scale Scrum. Okay, so the question is, you have a model like this and you want to implement it, yes, but how exactly? And if we could help, well, I mean, we are trying to give some help in implementing these things in a sane way. So then, in the chat there is a question: would it be possible to have a follow-up session later? Well, sure, if you want, absolutely. Okay, I know it's very difficult to explain you 3 years of deep thinking in a matter of 1 hour, but
yeah. So so as Pierluigi pointed out, we are closing down to 10 here, and we need to hold the session. So if people are interested in nerding more in this topic, I think, and I heard Pierluigi saying yes to that. Let's find out some way of allowing that to happen, so people can meet and take another session on that. Let's help facilitate organizing something around that. So there is a possibility of doing that. Totally fine.
Yep.
Once again, Pierluigi, thank you very much for the presentation. We will share the material afterwards. We will upload the video. Yes. And let's see how to facilitate something around more deep dive, or whatever people want to call it.
Yes.
Yeah,
and I will add in the slides a pointer to an interview that Colin Bird gave to Nigel Baker, where he's basically going a little bit into some of these concepts. That could be an interesting video to watch, and I will point you to that as well.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you then.
And thank you again. So that's
enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, exactly. Have a good day, everybody. We will share the content afterwards. When we have more events, we will share those in the coming weeks on the meetup, and hope to see you all in the next event.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for arranging.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice seeing you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.